problem is that we're not
Blacks
telling
here in
the
this
city
city have made a significant contribution.
in life than they ever have.
Welcome to Minority Focus. I'm your host of the show, Jimmy Moore. And joining me on the show today are two individuals that have served our city in a couple of capacities over the years, and we're very happy to have them with us. One being Mr. Herschel Dungy, who's the Human Resources, or who is the former Human Resources Director in Paducah, and the other, whom I need but show his face, I know, and I've often referred to myself as the epitome of tact and diplomacy in our political arena here.
Very flattering.
The former City Commissioner Robert Coleman. Glad to have you both.
Thank you for having me.
I need to say up front that for the city of Paducah, was offered an opportunity to schedule a show to rebut anything that may be said on this one. However, they elected not to do so. Brother Dungey, I'll start with you. Many of us know about the situations that you, or the situation that you've been involved in, or involved with recently. All of us don't know the particulars about it, the ins and outs about it. Share.
Well, Brother Moore, as you may know, or you alluded to, in April of 2009, I, along with 13 other employees, of course one has been recalled, were informed that because of anticipated shortfalls in revenue, that we were being terminated or laid off, a reduction in force. Didn't believe it then, don't believe it now. And you know what was interesting, I was informed on, I never will forget the date, April the 7th, I was handed a letter, which I have a copy of it right with me in my possession today. And in between that 1 week period, I called several cities, called about 10 cities. Because the only thing I had heard of up to that time, I think Louisville, the largest city in Kentucky, their mayor had mandated that all city employees take a 10% decrease. So I called 10 other cities to see what they were doing. And while all of them anticipated a shortage of revenue for whatever reason, lower sales tax, property tax, payroll taxes, there was not one city in April of 2009 that was anticipating laying off employees. In fact, I was told several times that, that would be the last thing we would do, because there's other measures that one takes, furloughs, or like the city of Louisville, a 10% decrease in salary, vacation time. There's many ways to deal with it. Layoffs is the last thing. And this was interesting too, because about a couple of months before, I was directed by the city commission to check on the other cities and their DUI policy as it relates to off-duty behavior. So if they could do that, go through that process for one person, because at the time we had a city department head that was serving a 90-day suspension.
Right.
You'd think they would do that for 14 people they were getting ready to terminate.
I'm curious, the matter about taking a 10% cut and what have you, that you were told made this necessary.
Well, no, I wasn't. No, not 10%. We were just told our positions we were being terminated.
Right.
But in Louisville, they did take a 10%.
Right.
And that Louisville was the only city in April of 2009. Now, there may have been, since the economy's gotten worse, that has taken any adverse measures such as that. Nobody else was laying off employees but Paducah. Right. So either they had a great crystal ball, or something happened. And then, voila, a year later, a miraculous recovery.
Right. No comparison as to what this 10%, how it would affect the other cities, or the comparison as to how it will affect the other cities. Paducah has X amount of money to deal with, et cetera. There's a cut in it, this will be affected. Monumental. Some other city, perhaps not. because of the monies that they have available to them to run the cities. No comparison, no nothing, just across the board.
McCracken County, same revenue stream, I think. They didn't lay off anybody.
Welcome.
What do you want to know?
With the goings on that I know you're perfectly familiar with, as far as the the commissioner, what they do. Is this something that you've ever seen before, experienced?
Well, let me focus on how I became involved in this and why I'm here this afternoon with former HR Director Dungy. I have been out of city government now for about 18 months, since January 1st, 2009. And I've made one appearance at City Hall at a commission meeting since that time. And that one appearance was the anticipated layoff of employees. I made that appearance at the urging of a lot of citizens who felt that I had some good input, some good recommendations. So prior to that meeting, I talked with some business leaders here in Paducah, and I made my appearance. I'm familiar with the number of employees that we usually have here in city government. And it was strange to me that night at the meeting because Paducah city government has, at that time, approximately 340 city employees. And of 340 employees, it was anticipated, or it was prepared, to have a layoff of 14 people. And that's a very, very minute sum when you're dealing with 340 employees. Now, it sounds minor, and these kind of terms may be applicable in an abstract view, but when you're telling a person that they no longer have an income to support their family, it's a major event. Mm-hmm. And so other businesses across the country, and even here in Paducah, for example, I spoke with an individual in one of Paducah's major institutions. The institution is connected nationwide. And he said to me, he said, Mr. Coleman said, yes, that our company is facing some financial shortfalls. And we were anticipating layoffs. And our employees, we got together with our employees. And at the suggestion of our employees, we had a recommendation that was accepted where we did not have to lay off anybody. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, our employees agreed to a 38-hour work week instead of a 40-hour work week. We calculated the savings of the 38-hour work week, and that had the appearance of an excellent resolution of the problem right then. And so we decided to, instead of laying off people, to save people's jobs, to support their families and support their needs and what is necessary, we went to 38 hours. Right. At that meeting, and the only meeting that I've appeared at City Hall since leaving City Hall, I made the recommendation of reduced hours. I also made the recommendation that if you didn't want reduced hours, many people like to be off on a 3-day weekend. Mm-hmm. So I suggested maybe once a month, every employee, instead of working 4 days a week, they would have what is referred to as a long weekend. Mm-hmm. Make the calculations, see how much savings that would be. And I pleaded with city government that night. Not only did I make the presentation, there were one official who was representing employee union. He said, he asked the people, said, don't do this right now. Look at the alternatives. Look at the alternatives as to what can be done, because with the individual member of government making this decision, this may be something abstract and it's not touching them. But when that employee has to go home and tell his family, I don't have a job, or her family, I don't have a job anymore, it's very, very damaging. It's proven to be that way all over the country. So these layoffs could have been
avoided,
not have happened. There were other alternatives. As a matter of fact, one of the speakers said, look, consider these things. And what was disturbing to me is they could have temporarily tabled this and evaluated the presentations. I was not the only one that spoke, but they did not, as if my memory serves me correctly, shortly after those of us who spoke at that meeting had finished, they proceeded with laying off 14 people. And what is strange to me is the number of people, and this is why I was urged to come down and make these kind of things known, because people say, now Coleman, you were there. You know what's in city government. So the makeup of these people is very strange to us. You have the individual who is in charge of all personnel in city government, the Human Resources Director. In any responsible organization, that position, we're not looking at names, that position should be the last, because that's the person who coordinates the employees, who keeps the records of all the employees, their qualifications, their classifications, and all of these kinds of things that should be necessary when you're going to have to lay off employees.
That's a question that I had too. Is it known how it was decided where the cut would be? Does anybody know that? Is that?
Well, let me kind of, leading up to the April 7th notification of those that were to be terminated, there were 4 meetings held, all employee meetings held in the City Commission chambers. And there was explained the anticipated, a hunch, speculation that the city was going to lose so much or needed to cut the budget by so much, I think $1 million. And there may be, under this efficiency operations plan of the city manager, it may necessitate some layoffs. Insofar as who was decided, a week before we were notified, all department heads had to make a presentation before the commission, pretty much depicting their utility as a department, what your contribution was, the whole 9 yards. I did that for my department, Human Resources. You know, these were our key areas. This is what we contributed to the overall, to the city, providing services to the city's workforce. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I had no input into who was being laid off. And I don't know, I have my own theory about it though.
Well, the people, all the positions that we're talking about, of those, got to cut these because we need to save money and all that sort of thing. Anybody in those places now, in those positions?
The function is still going on.
Just the
I mean,
function
when you
itself.
have 300 plus employees, somebody's got to do it.
There's no heads. There's no heads of these.
It was, well, I know my department was consolidated with finance. And of course, that's left brain, right brain. I mean, you know, and of course, Public Works was consolidated with engineering. And let's talk about another issue here, germane to, I think, this program. The city has touted its emphasis on diversity. Well, these actions, you know, was an abomination to that, because it wasn't just myself, an African American, but the largest department, Public Works, was headed by a Native American Indian, Ernie Vai, you know. And add to that a Asian Pacific Islander who developed the city's GIS program, Joe Pamisis. With one felt swoop, now I know they like to say, but we hired a black African American police chief. Well, at the time that we were terminated, that hadn't been consummated yet. He hadn't accepted the position. And you know what's funny about that? Ironically, the first 2 people he talked to, because when he first initially came to Paducah, all the department heads interviewed him and talked to him. The first 2 department heads that he talked to upon his arrival in Paducah was Ernie Vai, the Native American Indian, former Public Works Director, and me.
Well, no doubt, no question.
And he called me when he had heard that we were laid off, and I encouraged him to come here, you know. But that's a slap in the face of diversity. But then, you know, it's a sham anyway. because this city has a history going back 20 years when it was under a conciliation agreement with the Kentucky Human Rights Commission on various atrocities perpetrated against employees of color, namely African American employees. It
But of
had,
course,
so
are
I'm
we-
just one in a long list.
Are we totally clear, though, that this has nothing to do with racism or any color of
What?
skin? nothing
Those are
like
your
that?
words. Yes, it does. I call it like it is. I believe, now incidentally, let me say this. I won't be incandescently clear. If my performance was deficient, it would have been nice to have that feedback. But for the 5 years and 10 months that I worked as Human Resources Director, I never had a performance evaluation or appraisal. So, I mean,
So you're saying that you can undeniably point to racism as a fact?
Yes.
A concrete fact?
yes, I've said it. I believe that and this is the despicable. And if I'm mad, just to put a price tag, you said the effects, the deleterious effects of my being laid off. How about $50,000 in terms of a decline in household income? That's 50,007 to be exact. Okay, that's rough. But and here's the thing: based on a hunch, and yes, I think that the most despicable aspect of this was that the economic depression, recession, as it called, the 8 million people that were laid off, most of whom for legitimate reasons, places closed, factories closed, like General Tire.
Right.
That while it's not palatable, ever being laid off. If your place closes, you accept that. It's not palatable, but you can accept it. But to be laid off on a hunch or speculation, and what they did was they took the opportune time, economic recession nationwide, to do what they've been wanting to do for a very long time.
Well,
and I can elaborate on that.
The monies that were supposed to be saved, or whatever the advantages were to be in these cuts, has that been realized? Have those savings or whatever, has that been realized? Is it hasn't been a fruitful?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, let me focus on something. Let me focus on something. What in the ideal corporation of government where you have various department heads, various departments, period, the ideal situation would have been to evaluate the budgets of your various departments, realizing what potentially has to be saved. After you evaluate the budgets of all of your departments, then you would ask your departments, the persons in charge of those departments, we need for you to reduce your spending by X amount of money. You calculate the total saved by those departments, reducing their budgets by a designated amount or designated percentage. Then you come up with a figure as to how to do these layoffs. Now, the layoffs did not have to come with just employees. They could have been realized through expenditures. They could have been realized through several means that occur in city government, but they were not. Now, what happened and what is alarming to the public out there is the question came to me, and sometimes I would shy away from it by saying, well, I'm not there. But the question coming to me was, Commissioner, how did they arrive at the people who were to be laid off? Layoffs should be impartial. Layoffs should be on a priority basis as to whether or not the performance of a certain job is necessary. I would say certainly in the case of where we have two department heads, and then you have another highly technical person who brought technology to our city, and we realize the benefits of it. These people are doing valuable work. So when you go to that, it's ironic that these kinds of positions were included in the layoffs. So the idea of intelligently evaluating your various departments, having each department reduce its budget, proposing to the city employees, and the city employees coming back and saying, look, we'll work 38 hours a week, or I'll take a long weekend, we'll take a long weekend once a month. There were numerous options that were not discussed. It was like we're taking 14 people and throwing them under the bus.
They didn't even discuss these options.
As I said, I'm not there. I was not there.
No, on April the 7th, that's 1 week before the city commission voted, those 14 of us were handed letters. They made a personal appearance in each of our work areas and handed us letters. But see, let me say this, I wasn't surprised, because let's go back in retrospect, and I know you were here when I was hired initially. It was explained to me in a breakfast meeting of the Interracial Men's Group that meets, it's an organization started by Reverend Waldrop and Anton Reese when he was here. It was stated in that meeting that my hiring was voted against because they didn't feel I would fit right. And why it went over me, I mean, this was sitting about 15 men heard this.
That couldn't have had anything to do with your not being a Paducah native, could it? I mean,
Yeah, I don't think so, because if you remember, in March of 2003, there's several excerpts in the Paducah Sun, I have them with me, whereby the mayor said, and I quote, I'm not going to quote, I'll just say, he implied that we're going to fill the human resources director's position because my predecessor was retiring, and that if we find a qualified African American, so much the better, because that's what we're looking for. So, and you know the story. Then there were 3 of us on the short list: one white male from Durham, North Carolina, a white female from Maryland, and myself.
What happened to African American? I thought you said he said he was going to find one qualified African American.
Well, they did. They found me.
Okay.
Let me say that in terms of relevant work experience, I had more than the other 2 candidates put together. Not to mention that I had more labor relations experience with unions. I had more, but I didn't have, the only difference is the guy from North Carolina had worked his entire 7 years or 8 years work experience in the public sector. He was deputy, I think, city manager with responsibility for human resources. But he wasn't the guy that was hired. They hired the female from Maryland who had no public sector experience, no labor relations experience, and only had a baccalaureate or bachelor's degree.
No other black people interviewed?
I don't know. I know there was 3 of us that were the prime candidates. And they hired a woman that had a bachelor's degree, only a bachelor's degree. The guy from North Carolina had a master's. I don't like to mention it, but just for the course of this program, I will. I have a bachelor's, degree and three master's degrees. A master's in public administration, a master's in business, and a master's in labor relations. So when the community saw this and the Paducah Sun juxtaposed the 3 candidates, it wasn't about me, because I didn't know anybody here. They were mad because, number one, some people felt they had been lied to. Well, wait, you said you're going to hire if you find an African American that's qualified, you're going to hire him or her. And then when you juxtapose our, bio sketches, it was obvious who the best candidate was.
With no absolute regard to what you did or how you did what you did, how much did job performance play into this? A lot of times an employee is totally...
Let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you. I was present. I was a member of the commission when we were in the process of hiring a director of human resources. I came here this evening, I was going to speak on my appearance in terms of the budget shortfall, but this is an area where a lot of people have urged me, said, now you are what is called an eyewitness, and you know what happened. Well, this is what happened. We decided on the qualifications of the person that was desired to be human resources director for the city of Paducah. Remove all names, okay? And the final 3 were Mr. Dungey, and he said another gentleman and from a southern city.
North Carolina.
And the lady, I thought she was from Pennsylvania. I'm not for sure, but that's not important. But the qualifications that we were looking at was their education, their job experience, and we were giving priority to those persons who had experience in city government work. Now, out of the three candidates, the younger of the three candidates was the gentleman from the South, but he had worked in smaller places with populations of around 12,000 people. I'm not for sure, but he did have government experience. The next person was Mr. Dungy. Mr. Dungy had municipal government experience. He had multiple degrees in terms of his education, and he had experience. The third person was the lady candidate, and all of her experience was in the private sector, no government experience whatsoever. And I think the educational degrees in terms of her qualifications were not in that area either. And so that's how they stacked up in terms of experience and education. Removing all the names from them, if you look at the experience, if you look at the education, if you look at the total picture of the three candidates that we were reviewing, it was obvious that the stated credentials, qualifications as reported we were going to evaluate were not utilized.
So no question, the qualification is there,
Yeah.
The experience is there. You never had evaluations or any, you never had any?
I'll repeat.
Nothing
Let me
written?
We've
got about 2 minutes left,
Okay.
less than 2 minutes. So.
In the 5 years, 10 months that I was employed, City of Paducah's Human Resources Director, I never had a performance evaluation or appraisal.
The usual, you're doing a good job there. We really appreciate you. Fine job you're doing, but
Never got that too.
no
It was part of the
evaluation.
marginalization process. Marginalization meaning that your contributions and accomplishments are somewhat diminished.
Right.
That's what I call the racism of the 21st century.
And I can understand that. I often say to guests who are here, we'll have you back sometimes, perhaps, but this is an absolute. I'm very sorry we only have a half an hour on
So
this.
am I.
There'll have to be another half hour. That's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We'll definitely get back to this. Again, the City of Paducah declined to do a show of rebuttal on the matter. Would really like to hear from them. Thank you very much for watching. Be watching in the very near future, and we'll have some more for you on this matter. For Minority Focus, I'm Jimmy Moore.